ओम ज्ञानतिमिरन्दस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनाशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। नमो विष्णुपदाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्तस्वामिनिधि नमः। नमस्ते सरस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणि निर्विशेषण्यवादी पश्चात्यदेशतारिणि वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्येव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिव सदि गौर भक्तवृंद। हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे. Welcome everybody for a session on yoga for humanity. Today is the World Yoga Day. In the Yoga Sutras or Gita also speaks very simple principle. The sutras are small, but they have a universal wisdom, a wisdom as deep, as large, as vast as the universe. No? So one of the mantras is Stiram Sukham Asanam. The three things are there: Stiram, Sukham, and Asanam. Now, when we see Stiram Sukham Asanam, the first principle that we need asan. Now, asan from the Ashtanga Yoga perspective could be your yoga mat, could be your straw mat, could be your cotton cloth. That is the asan. But beyond that asan, you need a samanastan. Krishna explains, not very high, not very low, equal, which is not, the land should be straight, right? Then that is the first principle performing asan. Now we expand this meaning in regards to asan. Asan also explains in one sense your place of action, your place of residence, your place of action, your place of, swadharma. That is asan. How that asan should be, it should be stiram. It should be asan, it should be stiram, stable. Just like when you go to a train, when you are taking a train in Mumbai, three people can sit peacefully, comfortably. When the fourth one comes, what happens? He has to perform a lot of circus. Right? Depending upon the size of the three people, the fourth person experiences comfort, discomfort, inconvenience. Right? One has to push. Similarly, when you are traveling in the plane, it doesn't matter how spiritually progressive you are, whenever you have a seat in between the two people, not the window seat, not the aisle seat, the middle seat, what happens? And especially when traveling a long distance, you will experience inconvenience. Because that asan is, you are stuck in between two people, and if they are not known to you, and if that is not stira, then there is no sukha. And if there is no sukha, then you cannot offer seva. So whether it is Patanjali's Yoga Sutra or Bhagavad Gita or any other book, the clear understanding is that you need a space, you need a stable space which has to make you happy. Right? So jab tak, as long as this concept of stiram sukham asanam does not happen, And the purpose of the yoga principle, when you perform the asan tadasan, for example, right? So you can do tadasan, and if you are a new beginner, when you do the tadasan, and when you close your eyes, many times when you close your eyes, there is a difficulty in balancing. Sometimes you fall front side, sometimes sideways. Why? Because there is no sthirata. So closed eyes tadasan is difficult unless you have done the sadhana for a long time of doing that yoga. Similarly, Shirshasana, right? A Shirshasana, the correct Shirshasana eventually is not to take the support of the wall. But what happens when you try to do Shirshasana? Please understand, a Shirshasana in one sense is the ultimate conclusion. When I saw B.K. Sayangarji had gone to his place to see. So in his ashram, in his yoga center, he was almost like 84-year-old and he was performing the asana. I met his secretary and the asana he was performing was Shirshasana. And he was doing that asana for a long time. There was so much of stability, almost like he was frozen in that asana. On the other hand, you see those who are delirious, those who are drunkard, those who are distressed, those who are diseased, even while walking on their 2 feet, they can't walk clearly. There is incoherence in walking, and there is incoherence in regards to where they are walking. Right? So it's an important principle. He was able to stand on Shirshasana. It looks very fascinating. But when people jump to doing Shirshasana, suddenly after a few days of practice, there are so many consequences. People twist, they hurt their neck, they hurt their back. Sometimes their head starts spinning. There is a pain because of the blood gushing into their brain. Right? So therefore, the whole concept of life and yoga, they're so interconnected with each other. Therefore, in the yoga asanas, yoga, when it is disconnected from the life, unfortunately, the modern commercialized yoga, rather than making us connected to the humanity, rather than making us connected to our integral self, this yoga only focuses on the asanas. It has removed the substance of the yoga and it has become an exercise, fashionable exercise. Of course, even if somebody does that much, somewhere they are starting their yoga. Eventually, if they keep doing it sincerely and properly, even the asanas, if they do properly, adding the pranayam, slowly, slowly the question will be raised about how this asana is connected to my entire life, how this asana is connected to entire prakriti. Therefore, from the birth till the death, based upon different posture exhibited by the human being, exhibited by the animals, exhibited by the nature, the great rishis conceived different asanas. Therefore, Yoga is synonymous to jivana. Yoga is synonymous to life, and life is synonymous to yoga. They cannot be separated. They have to be interconnected. Through the yoga, one should be able to see life, and through life, one should be able to understand, oh, here is yoga. Right. So last few days, I'm watching one elderly lady. She's a 70+ year. She has a body which is aspired by many young men and women. Thin body, no belly. She gets up, her day starts at 3:30, doing her spiritual practices, making garland, cooking for the family, right? And serving the servants also, seeing them they are getting or not. There is a rhythm in her life. She may not have all the knowledge. If you go and ask her, other day I asked her, she can't speak any other language other than Telugu. I asked her, what is your goal of life? Where you want to go? Vaikunta, Goloka, Shivaloka, where you want? So these are, it's like Shirshasana. She is capable of doing it in one sense from a philosophical perspective, but she lives for the present without even discussing about the whole concept of samachittatvam, the power of now. The power of now is naturally happening for her. And therefore, the concept of yoga, Ashtanga yoga, was not fashionable as it is now. It is not that when spiritual India was flourishing, even 500 years ago, you would find people walking with their yoga mat to perform yogasana. No, their entire life there was a rhythm. Therefore, their life itself was a yoga. They would achieve yoga through life. But nowadays, people's life has been so disarrayed. From eating to sleeping, even responding to the call of nature, even breathing, everything is so ayoga, so disconnected. And therefore, whenever someone comes and tells you, oh no, this yoga, we have the best of the yoga, and if you practice it, your life will be great. So therefore, the yoga clubs, the yoga institutions are growing to such an extent, it is a $1 billion business. So therefore, then somebody has to approve that this is the International Yoga Day. Before it was a life, now it is a fashion. So unless yoga turns into life, and unless life turns into yoga, then it apparently looks like yoga, but it is nothing but a roga. Why? Because it is the life of isolation. And therefore, the Bhagavatam explains the three a definition of yoga. Very interesting. Generally, the regular definition is linking, uniting, filling, or sometimes emptying all the wrong desires, integrating. Right? That is what yoga is. But here, the definition of yoga, according to the third canto of the Bhagavatam, yoga is dharma plus kriya is equal to yoga. Right? The interesting definition of yoga is dharma plus kriya is equal to yoga. It's a very interesting definition, right? What is dharma again? Dharma is basically integration of every aspect of our life, different duties, different naturalities of life, different characteristics of life. When they are all integrated, that is called as dharma. And kriya means what? Kriya means there is an action. So dharma plus kriya is equal to yoga. So therefore, when we say yoga for humanity, before we get into humanity, there has to be human, right? From next week, we are doing our samskara classes. So humanity, a society cannot exist without the self, a person. A community cannot exist without a common person, a woman, right? So then when they all together are united, then it becomes a community, it becomes a society. So therefore, when the great president of America, right, he asked this question, John F. Kennedy, if I'm not wrong, he said, don't ask what the country can do for you. Ask what you can do for the country, right? It became a statement where people always spoke about. We studied this statement as young as when our English, medium started, English subject started, not medium. In 5th or 7th standard, this statement was there in our textbook. All right? Don't ask what the country can do for you. Ask what you can do for the country. It's a half statement, because in the Mahabharata, Bhishma Dev, when he was speaking to Yudhishthir, very interesting, he said the definition of Raja, there are Raja and there are Prajas, right? It is the responsibility of the Praja to do something for the Raja, because that time Raja was synonymous to Rashtra. But the Raja's duty was, the word Raja means Ranjati iti Raja. Ranjati iti, one who entertains his Praja. So the statement can only be considered as integrated where the king will say, my dear citizens, we are here representing the Rashtra to do everything for you. That is one side. And the second side is the Prajas are there to say, hey Raja, we are here to do everything for you, means Rashtra. If this reciprocation does not exist, then yoga for humanity cannot be realized. Right. So therefore, the principle of Sanatana Dharma explains so beautifully that when people operate on their stable platform, that means their Swadharma platform, first of all, they become self-sufficient. When they become self-sufficient, they also contribute naturally and properly. If this does not happen, then whatever goes in the name of yoga, whatever goes in the name of faith, whatever goes in the name of religion, they become counterproductive, right? They are not able to contribute, but they are counterproductive. And when they are counterproductive, then yoga acquires many different kinds of names: beer yoga, dog yoga, right? Using different kinds of gimmicks to prove that we are doing this, right? So therefore the yoga loses its credibility. And if you study, as we were mentioning in the beginning, if you study carefully, yoga is so connected to life. By practicing yoga, you cannot remain isolated. By practicing yoga, you cannot remain separated. By practicing yoga, you cannot remain individualistically selfish. There is no harm in exploring the individual, the very self, you know, self actualization, self realization. Self is very important in yoga practice. But part of that self, swa and sarva, are interconnected. Right. So therefore, if we study carefully, we read in the Shastras, there are two disadvantaged qualities in Kali Yuga. One is quarrel and second is hypocrisy. Quarrel and hypocrisy. But if you see carefully, the quarrel and hypocrisy, the foundation of quarrel and hypocrisy comes from the foundation of exclusivity. What is exclusivity? Exclusivity is nothing but isolation. Me, my yoga mat, my yoga class, and I move out. When you come to the path of practicing spirituality, if you have come from the background of extreme selfishness, giving up bad habits is one aspect of spirituality. The external bad habits, living a dirty life, living an unhealthy life, living a life of unhygiene, these are easy to do in one sense. There are people who become pure vegetarians, become free from all kinds of liquor, intoxication, without having any spiritual connection. So this, you don't need a spirituality to be cleansing your bad habits. You can be vegan and cleanse your bad habits. You can be a gym going and cleanse your bad habits. You can be a cricket captain and become a vegetarian. Right? You'll find many people like that. Right? Yes, this is one of the rule for practicing adhyatma. But there is another contamination, the contamination of selfishness. Right? When we grow in this world, the land of competition, it is but natural, unfortunately. It is unnatural, but it has become natural to think about one's own self. So selfishness becomes survival of the fittest. And that becomes a condition for people to be selfish to grow. And having that foundation, one come to the path of spirituality, other habits go away. But the habit of being selfish does not go. Sometimes dangerously the selfishness increases. Now it takes on to the guise of being spiritualist. So therefore, dharma is to become integrated in every aspect of life. When that integration does not happen, the isolation happens, and isolation gives rise to superiority complex. When the superiority complex is developed, either you use your superiority complex to make everybody become exactly of your prototype, your photocopy. They should be like me only. They should be what I believe in. When that becomes very strongly rooted in one psychological reality, then to make everybody like me, people are willing to do anything and everything. Imagine one lady said something, I don't know what she said. The entire Islamic countries have come together and willing to cause any kind of violence. So this is not dharma, wherein because something where you heard wrong, you are willing to kill, slaughter, rape, destroy. Imagine how can such ideology be cause of growth of humanity? Not possible, right? Similarly, if people take to certain path and develop superiority complex and do not feel, if people go do something wrong, verbally abusive, physical abusive, just because you don't follow my faith, I will not allow you to drink water from my place. The water body will not come to you. Same thing happens in the political reality also. The political parties provide facilities depending upon where they got the maximum vote for. Isolation, it's an isolation. When that isolation happens, the world, rather than connected to humanity, the world only deals with the selective human beings. And when the selective human beings are supported at the cost of the humanity, rather than it becoming yoga, it becomes biggest of the roga. सबसे बड़ा रोग बन जाता है. So therefore, it is very, very interesting to understand that how our Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita or Patanjali Muni in the Yoga Sutra, they always add this concept, the inherent character of self is connected to the society. The inherent character of the society is connected to the self. You cannot separate the society from the self, and you cannot separate the self from the society. Therefore, humanity and a human and a humanity, they cannot be disconnected. It cannot be disconnected. So therefore, the Pandavas, you don't hear in the Mahabharata, they were performing different kinds of asanas. There is a description of offering water to Surya Dev. That is there. But it doesn't discuss anything about they were performing regular asanas. In my little yogi book, I've quoted Krishna lived for 125 years because according to the Upanishad, forgot the name of that Upanishad, he performed the Purusha Meda Yajna. What is Purusha Meda Yajna? He went under the guidance of Ghora Angiras. He learned the art. Now, because the Supreme Bhagwan has come to establish Dharma, and many times he sets Dharma straight by being example himself. खुद एक उदाहरण बनते हुए. Right? So he acts like a human being even though he's not. He performed his sadhana also. And because of that performance of sadhana, he expanded his life. He doesn't need any life because he's beyond Janma Mrityu Jara Vyadhi. But as I said, because he's living in this world. So Sri Krishna stayed for 125 years. And he dedicated his life. You know, he enjoyed his life in Vrindavan. And he contributed life beyond Vrindavan to the upliftment of dharmic principle. Right? When we separate these two things, then what happens? We wrongly try to perform our Shirshasana. When we perform our Shirshasana without having a right and clear understanding, it causes breakage of our head. It hurts our back. Right? So therefore, this is the foundational principle of yoga. What is that foundational principle? That you are there, the society is there. Society is there and you are there. Don't ask what country can do for you. That the citizens are supposed to tell other citizens. But the king has to say, I am here for all of you, not pampering them. It is so sad. You know, the youth of India, how can you imagine that you have a nasty heart to destroy the property of a nation? It is exactly like अपने घर पे आकर घर को जलाने के समान है. They do not care, creating violence, creating anarchy, creating disarray, because their selfishness is not being fulfilled. You know, destroy, destroy, destroy. ये मनुष्य कैसे हो सकता है? Right? I was telling somebody, whether it is marriage ceremony, whether it is Upanan samskar, whether it is Vidyarambhya samskar, in all the samskaras, imagine these samskaras are specifically connected to a person. व्यक्ति केंद्रित है. व्यक्ति विवाह एक युवक और एक युवती का हो रहा है. They are considered to such an extent that they are seen as the representation of Lakshmi and Narayan. इतना उनके स्थान को बढ़ाया गया है जब विवाह संस्कार चल रहा है. When they are getting married, शिव पार्वती कहा गया. Right? There is so much of, in one sense, giving such a respect for somebody is getting married. All the attention. Very important. That has to be done. That should be continued to be doing. But part of that samskara is charity, दान. अपने स्वयं को इतना महान बनाने के बाद, expanding your ego to such an extent, I am the wife, I am the husband, I am getting married. Along with that, there has to be equal amount. I'm not saying equal amount of contribution to the growth of the society. That is yoga proper. Otherwise, if it does not happen like that, then however yoga classes, yoga groups we join, however large number of learning body we acquire, what does it do? It does not at all benefit to such a large extent. Right? the religion, the faith-centric religion, have caused certainly great violence in the human existence. And this is predicted in the Bhagavatam, predicted in the Gita also. Shraddha in the mode of ignorance is exclusive, causes violence. And when you create an ordinary murderer, at some point of time, he or she feels regret and remorse. Right? They feel, I should have not done. But somebody kills in the name of religion. In Goa, if you know the story of Portuguese, during the Portuguese Inquisition, right? A person who executed hundreds of people, burning them because they did not get converted, he was raised to the status of saintliness. In fact, there should be a court case against him for causing limitless violence to people. And this is not a statement, it's a recorded history. Can you imagine you are killing people just because they did not convert to your religion? Burn their temples, burn their people, cut them, kill them. And your queen gives you the position of saintly people. While dying, there is no remorse, there is no regret. Rather, there is a conviction and satisfaction. Whatever I did was absolutely right for the sake of my faith. And this is what Sanatan Dharma, Dharma is absolutely anti to such thought process, such ideas. The foundation of Dharma is cooperation. Krishna is a yogi and yogeshwar. Imagine when he came to Duryodhan, for that matter, when he came to Duryodhan, the Lord Duryodhan was responsible for so much of violence against the Pandavas. But Sri Krishna was giving an opportunity to Duryodhan also. Why was he giving opportunity? He tried to convince Karna. He tried to convince the elders, we can avoid this war. Right? He said, hey Duryodhan, join with the Pandavas. If you join with the Pandavas, there will be no war. Your Bharatakula will expand to such an extent. Even the Devatas from the heavenly planet will not dare look in this direction. Why was he doing it? So that there should be cooperation. No, the Krishna's proposal of Shanti Dut is much superior to the teaching of all those teachers about peace, forgiveness, compassion, no retaliation. These are in one sense neutral traits. I forgive you, a neutral trait. I don't punish you. But here the Lord came to Duryodhan, not neutral, not negative, but positive. He said, join with the Pandavas. There will be such an expansion for your life. The proposal was not only about 5 villages and rest of the kingdom. The proposal was working with the Pandavas as a team. Tumhara swarth bhi rahega, your swarth will be there, and there will be so much of saving of people. That's what he told Karna also. Right? But still people call Krishna, oh, he was so tricky. After the death of Ravan, this is yoga. After the death of Ravan, Sri Ramachandra did not celebrate the death of Ravan. Imagine when your faith is centered around tamogun, you become an exclusivist. You make a claim that there was nothing better than this up until now. This is the highest. When this psychology comes in people's mind, it is but natural that at some point of time, rather than having idea of gratitude, it turns into superiority complex and start lecturing everybody else. Where you are willing to kill Nupur Sharma, they want to kill her. But here Lord Ramachandra, when he saw Ravan first time, let us see the offenses. Ravan's offense was much higher, much greater, the offense of Nupur Sharma. Right, much higher. But when Ramachandra came there, what was his goal? His goal was to see that Ravan does not die. Ravan transforms. Ravan changes. Mother Sita told Ravan, can you imagine? She tells Ravan, hey Ravan, you know what, if you make friendship with Ram, she doesn't say Sharanagati to Ram. She understands his ego. तो इसलिए वो नहीं कहते कि तुमको शरण जाना चाहिए, बोलते उनसे मित्रता कर ले रावण. अगर तू मित्रता करेगा, if you make a friendship with him, he will bestow you. You'll grow nicely. And even till the last moment, when Ravan, couldn't change, did not change, not willing to change, Sri Ramachandra reluctantly killed Ravan, and he warned our what's his name, Vibhishan, that the enmity was not there with Ravan. It was only to the crime he committed. Ram did not bother about his Shraddha in Ram or not. He committed a crime. He was killed for the crime because he was not willing to change. And Sri Ramchandra told Vibhishan, if you do not perform his last rites, I will perform. The Kauravas, please understand, this is the Sanatan Dharma's philosophy. Many times we see, in the name of being very loyal to their path, many people become radicalized, if not physically becoming violent, but they become psychologically violent. When they become psychologically violent, even while practicing yoga sadhana, but their psychology is of a rogi or rog ka psychology. Because constitutionally, that is how Ramachandra, that is how our Krishna saw, constitutionally. And therefore, after the death of the Kauravas, Lord Krishna came to Dhritarashtra, saying that there was no other choice for us to establish dharma other than killing Duryodhan. And therefore, my dear Dhritarashtra, please forgive the Pandavas. They did not come there to regret for killing. That they had to do. But they did not come there to celebrate the death of the Kauravas. That is yoga proper. That is Stiram Sukham Asanam. Expand the resources so that you can accommodate more and more people in your life. And the beauty of Yoga Sutras or Gita 6th chapter is that it begins, the reference point of that yoga, that highest yoga, begins with the body only. It begins with the body. The spiritual elevation does not happen simply by the rituals. They're an important part of life, but only rituals of visiting holy places, if that becomes, my goal is I just want to visit the holy place. I don't care for anything. This is also kind of exclusivity. My goal is only to read Bhagavatam. If it is happening naturally is one thing. My goal is I don't do anything. One thing we have to focus on. Doesn't work like that. Yoga is not built like that. Just like when you see this assembly lines. I remember in Detroit seeing this assembly line, the Ford motors, this big Jeep. I think within 80 minutes, the entire vehicle is assembled. It's a fascinating to see, right? But the point is, if something goes wrong in one part of the assembly line, they have to stop the entire assembly line till they repair. They are dependent to each other, not interdependent. In interdependency, very interestingly, if I have certain limitations, right? I'm the part of the assembly line, but I have certain limitation. That limitation will be dealt by somebody who has a better potential. So the Prakriti is so designed that there will be all class of people. And because there are all class of people, the yoga helps us to provide everybody empowerment to grow from their level to higher level, their level to higher level, their level to higher level, right? Rather than ridiculing, condemning, rather than that providing and empowering. So therefore, whether it is Yoga Sutras or Bhagavad Gita, Krishna makes a very strong, assertive point in the 6th chapter. What is that point he makes? He says, Tasmad Yogi Bhava Arjuna. Arjuna, at all cost, you become a yogi. Then he explained, Yogi Namapi Sarvesham Madgate Nantaratmana. The foundational principle of anybody's and everybody's life is a life of yoga, the integrated yoga, the responsible yoga, the disciplined yoga. When that becomes the foundation, on that foundation, then you can build your own specific taste of yoga. I want to be Bhakti Yogi. I want to be Ashtanga Yogi. I want to be Karma Yogi. I want to be Jnana Yogi. But the foundational principle of yoga gives rise to cooperative life. And therefore, we'll conclude with this. In Sanatan Dharma, the Rakshasas are also born of Kashyapa Maharshi, and Devatas are also born of Kashyapa Maharshi. Rakshas, Devatas, their father is one and the same. They are not an outside force. The evil is not an outside force. Evil is not a natural force. Evil is not an enemy force. Evil is basically covering, it's an external covering, and therefore they are not eternally condemned. They are also given an opportunity to rise and grow. And therefore, when Ravan was killed, he had worshipped Lord Shiva. And his stotra, which is a famous stotra, whether it is Bahubali movie, whether it is other, dramas or in different pujas, imagine that Ravana's stotra is used for glorifying the great Lord Shiva. Because Ravan is not an outsider. So yoga has the power to understand what the limitation is, what the roga is. Rather than destroying the rogi, they remove the roga and re-establish them in yoga and help them to grow in such a way their life is integrated and fruitful. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prabhuji. Truly, yoga is very hope-giving, and it's about transforming ourselves and people around us. You explained so beautifully that yoga is about being inclusive and not exclusive. And how does one develop this mindset, Prabhuji? That's a question which is playing on our minds.
Yes, because that is how exactly life is. There is if we allow ourselves to understand through Bhagavad Gita and allow ourselves to see our surrounding, think little deeper from the perspective of, sometimes even selflessness is caused by selfishness only. If you just observe a little bit, I want to be selfless. Why? Because there is a selfish idea. What it is could be different thing. So therefore, as I said, if I realize I need my society around me and society needs me, if you reflect how Sanatan Dharma operates, you understand, you follow being a dharmic person. A dharma is nothing but integration of all the duties. As much as you're able to do that, that much you are able to perform your asanas very flexibly. The philosophical asana, the psychological asana, and that asanas also helps you to perform your physical asanas, or the physical asanas helps you have a greater vision. And therefore, one of the main important teaching of a real yoga guru is to say, never look what others are doing. Focus on your asanas. Be flexible according to what you can handle. Others may touch their hand to their foot, and you may not even go below your waist, your thighs, but that is your stretch. And slowly, slowly you will progress. Not that, oh, you guy, you're not able to touch. The perfection of yoga is not particular asana. The perfection of yoga is not putting your hand on the ground. The perfection yoga is getting that stretch, that flexibility. And touching the ground is a detail. So therefore, if we are inculcating these things, because exclusivity talks are extremely passionate. They have a power to, yes, there is an exclusivity, 100%, but that has to happen naturally, not at the cost of propaganda. You develop a special taste for eating something and you're happy with that, but you don't create a system that everybody has to do this one. So there is a personal taste. It should not disturb the societal relationship.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Prabhuji, there's a question which says that how does samskaras help us to, become a yogi?
Yeah, so therefore our rishis conceived, the whole concept of samskaras, to refinement. As much as you become refined, again, samskaras is not simply the ceremonies. Yes, there is a science behind the ceremonies also, which we will discuss in our 6th session class when we start from next week, right? So they do help, and therefore our great rishis conceived them.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Prabhuji. Prabhuji, after we develop the right mindset, we need to choose which yoga to practice. And there are, many types of yoga. So how does one ascertain which is the best yoga path for oneself?
See, again, this is a yes for the bhakti yogis. The conflict between different yoga system, which is not there in the Gita, will continue to exist. I say simple when I'm talking to an ordinary people. Ashtanga yoga is connected to discipline, which everybody needs. Karma yoga is connected to physical action, which everybody needs to do. Jnana yoga is connected to information, knowledge, wisdom, which everybody needs. And bhakti is connected to relationship, heart, which everybody needs. So therefore, from the perspective of emotions and sentiments in society, in relationship, we need intelligence, we need action, we need discipline, but we need more of a that affectionate relationship. So from that perspective, bhakti yoga, not the mundane superiority. From that perspective, everybody needs that, right? And we need all the four yogas. When you go to the spiritual world also, you become full of knowledge, full of bliss, full of eternality. Sat, chit and anand. Sat is existence. Only when you have existence, you can perform seva. When you are serving Krishna in the spiritual world, any action falls into the category of karma. But because there is so much of intense love, the flow of love is so much, so you don't see that as a separate. It is just an affection, pure affection. But from a technical perspective, knowledge is there because you are full of knowledge. Existence is there. That means you have all the limbs to engage. You are making garland to Krishna. Technically, it is karma yoga. But there is so much of love. Therefore, we do not create such a technical distinction. We just focus on the aspect of, there is nothing but bhakti. That is how it is defined. But from a technical perspective, all yogas simultaneously exist. And if you are not existing them simultaneously, there is something wrong. You are doing Gyan, you are doing Ashtanga, you are doing Bhakti, you are doing Karma Yoga. Otherwise, even to chant, you need senses. Even to speak, you need senses. Even to cry tears, you need to have tears. There is an action of something is moving. The water is flowing from your eyes. So Karma Yoga, Ashtanga Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, they are absolutely interconnected, integrated. You cannot do only bhakti without having this. Not possible. Doesn't make sense at all.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Prabhuji. Prabhuji, when we hear stories about, the gopis in the spiritual world, or, very saintly people like the Sadgoswamis, who probably practice pure bhakti, how do we see these, pastimes? Is it mainly for inspiration?
In their practice of devotional service, again, if you study their life, their practices, how much discipline was also there. Absolutely, how many literatures they read, what kind of life they lived, right? So, and then secondly, their life cannot be, they are like performing Shirshasana for hours together. And you see them, okay, I want to be like that only. You'll have a great fall. You'll break your bones only. Very simple. So therefore, certainly their life is there for us to be inspiration. And very slowly, very, very slowly following in their footsteps, but not imitating them. You cannot. You cannot say that I lost my heart in Vrindavan. You lost your heart has a tremble, not you means you. You're trembling because the stock market has come down. Your heart has trembled because your child did not get admission in a particular college. So understand where you stand and not imitating these great people, not even doing what they did. And Rupa Goswami explains in the Bhakti Rasamrita, no, however advanced you are, externally you still follow the method which I have given. Read Gita 3rd chapter. Krishna explained, even the great yogi has no duties to perform, but to set an example he does. So whether you are advanced or not, for the society, again Krishna is giving such an importance to the society, to set an example. He gives his own example. He said, even though I have no duties to perform, I still, if I don't, the entire world will be put into ruination.
Thank
So
you.
therefore, yeah.
Thank you very much, Prabhuji. If there are any questions, Prabhuji, can we take one question?
One question will take.
Yeah. Anybody would like to ask a question, you can raise your hand, or you could put your question in the chat box.
Somebody has put, I will take this one. I'll take this question. How can one unite the duties toward nation and toward God without contradicting and hating with another nation? Yes, the Rashtra, the Rashtra is the concept which is there in the Shastras. The Pandavas had their own Rashtra, right? A Rajya. And the people from the Yadukula, they had their own Rajya. You could go anywhere and everywhere, but you identify with your Rajya. And again, learn how Krishna taught the Kauravas to cooperate with the Pandavas. When Yudhishthira Maharaj performed the Rajasuya sacrifice, it is not destroying the country. It is fighting the king. And the max they would involve is less than 1/4 of the citizens in the political turmoil. No Vaishyas were touched, no Shudras were touched, no Brahmanas were touched, only the Kshatriyas. And it is not that, okay, you have 100,000 population. It is not that 25,000 are Kshatriyas, 25,000 are Brahmanas, 25,000. No, the number of Kshatriyas was less. The Brahmana was much less. Now also see Indian army, it will never be like what Ukraine's prime minister, president told, okay, I'm giving weapons to everybody. What is the number of people who are there in Indian army? 15 lakh, 20 lakh compared to 130 crore, right? So the war would happen between the two armies, not between the two countries. The modern man is more beastly, even though calls himself as more progressive. So therefore, when you see the war, the concept of hating nation was non-existent. अपने देश के प्रति अभिमान था, लेकिन दूसरे देश के प्रति द्वेष नहीं था. But the modern political situation is basically to love your country, you have to hate others, you have to destroy others, you have to cause violence to other country. So that is not the ideology of the Rashtra which is explained in the scripture. So therefore there is no contradiction, there is no conflict between loving your country and worshipping your God also. If Ravan, such a mean person, was given all the respect, why would you touch the citizen of another country? Doesn't make sense. We'll stop here. Thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Prabhuji, for this lovely conversation about how we can integrate through yoga, not only ourselves, but people around us and even nations. We meet next week on Tuesday to talk about samskaras, which is going to be a 6-session course every Tuesday. Thank you very much, Prabhuji, for this enlightening conversation. And thank you, participants, for joining us today, and wish you a very auspicious International Yoga Day once again. Thank you. Hare Krishna.